started to have some presentations on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as I was casting around for people to invite to the seminar series, I talked to Peter Morel, and he said, "Oh, Luis Mota-Bravo and Marlene de la Cruz would be perfect for the seminar series." And so I called them up, and I had a great conversation with them back in, must have been in August or so. And we had a really nice conversation about various issues surrounding the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I thought they would be really a good addition to the seminar series. And so I'll introduce both of them. Luis Mota-Bravo, he got his PhD at UC Irvine. He's currently the Director of Outreach, Research, and Training and Minority Science Programs at Irvine, as you can see on his slide. In 2005, the White House awarded the programs that he's directing the Institutional Presidential Award for Excellence in Science, Mathematics, and Engineering for developing a series of programs to increase the number and academic excellence of underrepresented groups. Currently, he holds 4 NIH grants that prepare underrepresented minorities for graduate schools, graduate students, undergrads, and community college students for the biomedical careers. So he will be one of the 2 people leading the conversation today. And then Marlene de la Cruz, she got her PhD at Riverside, and then she also did a postdoc at Irvine. And I assume after that postdoc, she started in the position as a Director of Student Academic Development at Irvine. And so with that, I'll turn it over to both Luis and Marlene, and I'll let you do your presentation, discussion, however you might see fit.
Thank you very much, Gary. So what I would like to do is in this time that we have is to have as much interaction with you. I think that is very important for the goals of the departments to have a discussion about these topics. So we call this presentation Applying Principles of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to Increase Underrepresented Minorities in Academia. And so as Gary mentioned, I direct these minority science programs that happen to have, so it's MSP. So these are the only programs that have an airport in our honor that is close to you. So I have directed this program since year 2000. And so these are funded by NIH, and they have this goal of precisely moving underrepresented minorities and what is called the academic pipeline. So just to serve as an outline, let's see, this is okay. So I'll be talking about the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then I'm gonna be also talking about our minority science programs and discuss effective interventions to build and maintain inclusive communities. That's one of the goals that has been discussed with Gary for your department. So let me start with the problem, the main problem that exists and the reason why the federal government, particularly NIH in our cases, is giving funds for these programs. And so this is exactly what I'm showing here. So in these graphs, I'm showing the percentage of principal investigators that have these, what is called the R01s. This is the main grants of the NIH. And so I divide them by race ethnic groups. So 72% of the principal investigators of NIH are considered, consider themselves whites, and 14% are Asian. And the blacks have less than 1%, Hispanics 3%, and Native Americans 0.05. So what I'm putting here in the bottom is the proportion of these groups among the population. And so that's exactly what we have here between the difference between the 2 bars. So these 2 bars should be of exactly the same size if there was equal representation of these groups. But as you can see, Black, Hispanic, and Native American, these 3 groups are underrepresented. And so this brings me to the point about the difference between minority and underrepresented. So the term minority comes from the US Census. This is what we self-identify when we check the boxes of race and ethnicity. And so these groups, Asian, Black, Hispanic, and Native Americans, are minorities just simply because they are the minority of compared to the white, which is the majority. However, these three groups in particular is what is called they are underrepresented. And so NIH has a budget of about $37 billion. And of course, it wants to increase the number of principal investigators that come from the underrepresented minority groups. This is a paper published in Science by the program director that is saying we are missing critical contributions to our talent pool. So why do we have this underrepresentation of these three main groups? So we can go back there are historical reasons, of course. I'm sitting here in Orange County, south of Los Angeles. This was the first county where there was a desegregation of the schools. So I have had faculty here in Irvine who tell me that they went to schools where Mexican Americans were prohibited from going there. So the family Mendez actually sued the Westminster Unified District in order for their children to be able to attend schools that were not only for Mexican Americans. So there is a history, of course. But if we come to the recent time, we see that there is a big disparity in terms of the income that exists. So in 2018, the national median household income was close to $62,000. However, among families of these different groups is very different. And so now we can contrast the extreme groups. So the median household income of Asian Americans is now twice that of the Black or African Americans. And so, of course, money is not everything, but it can buy you a lot of things. It can buy you, of course, life experiences, education, and that's, I think, one of the main reasons why we have, these disparities in the pipeline. So, if we look at what we know that the pipeline, the representation of these groups, we see that in the population in the age of 18 to 64, about 69% of that population is from well-represented groups, and about 30% roughly are from the underrepresented groups. So when students actually enter college, we start to see that there is already a reduction in the number of bachelor degrees granted. This number gets even smaller when it gets to the PhD, and it gets even smaller when it gets to the professor. So just to put some number, so we need to right now triple the number of PhDs awarded to underrepresented minority groups to reach parity with respect to the population. So 3 times as many PhD grant students from underrepresented minority groups. And of course, this has been discussed over the years. And the programs that we have started in the 70s. And there has been, of course, a national discussion about, the characteristics of these programs. And so perhaps some of you have seen this cover page from Science, and it talks about the pipeline program. So this was published in 1992. So it's almost 30 years since this discussion has started. And so if we look at the main points that some of the articles made here, is that we have to make long-term interventions. This is talking about the federal government. So to have a student that start a baccalaureate and then move on to a PhD program and then move on to a postdoc and then eventually become an independent researcher, you're going to need at least 15 years for that. And that's exactly what happened with our programs. We start to see those students who were in our programs as obtaining the baccalaureate degrees in 2005. We already have 4 of those students who are now in research intensive institutions. And we have many other ones that also serve as role models in community college, as well as the California State system. There are wonderful universities dedicated primarily to teaching. So the other aspect is that there has to be a sustained mentorship and support during the academic pipeline. So in the past, there was this idea that if we put them in the PhD, that's it. And so, but we have seen that that's not the case. We need to maintain this level of mentorship throughout the PhD, but also during the postdoc and also during the independent research. When they become independent researchers, particularly assistant professor level. So the other discussion that existed is that underrepresented minorities were not interested in pursuing research careers. That's proved to be absolutely false. Once you give them, the nurturing and you expose them to PhD degrees, when our students come to our programs, they have no idea about what is a PhD. They don't have a parent who went to college, much less knowing what a PhD is about. So all of them, they say, I want to be a doctor, a medical doctor, because that's the only advanced degree that they know after the baccalaureate. So we have to mentor the students. The other aspect that is important, that was discussed since 1992, is that there needs to be a rigorous evaluation of the programs based on measurable goals. So there are papers in this issue of Science that discussing how ineffective the programs have been. In terms of the money is given, students, for example, get their baccalaureate degree, but they never pursue PhD programs. So you can say, okay, was that money kind of wasted? Well, it was invested in education, but did not fulfill the purpose of increasing the pipeline of independent researchers. So moving now to currently, after 92, almost 30 years, what is the difference that exists? So the focus now is on the representation. So it's not an issue about minorities, as we discussed. It's an issue about underrepresentation. Who are the main groups? Is the African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans. So those are the three main groups. Historically, they have been largely underrepresented. Then other groups start to be added. Natives of the US Pacific Islands. This is important because it's the US, it's not every Pacific island. And of course, individuals with disabilities, with the Act on Disabilities. And very recently, we're talking about the last year or so, NIH started to put in the language now disadvantaged background. So they define it by seven categories, homelessness and so on. And the students need to identify at least two of those categories. And the other aspect is women. That, as we know, women in the academia and in faculty positions, particularly, are underrepresented. But it's not the case, for example, in college, that we will see in a moment. So in the case of women, it's also very important in the faculty position. And the focus is on preparing underrepresented minorities to get now PhD degrees. In the past, it was advanced degrees, and many of them ended up in MDs. However, it's known that most of the faculty have PhDs, and that's the reason why the emphasis is on PhDs. Okay, I don't know, I saw some questions that were coming up. Feel free to ask any question. Again, the idea is to have, yes, is there a question?
Luis, there was a question from Jason Jones. He asked, are veterans considered underrepresented?
Veterans. Yes, I have not seen that particular language in the, in the language of NIH. And so, yeah, so it's because it has focused on underrepresentation. And so actually, in a couple of years, NIH left it open to universities to define this underrepresentation. But the key is that they had to have data to show it, that there was underrepresentation. For example, some of the cultural proposals call it about the Appalachians that have apparently, very low income, not much educational opportunities and so on. And some universities, I think, made the argument, I think, successfully. So, yes. So let me move on to the next point is, what are the main reasons why we want to have underrepresented minorities in academia? So there are many different arguments, and so I just summarize them in these 3 points. One, because diversity is an asset for enhancing innovation and improving the nation's global economic leadership. I think I took this from NSF, or paraphrasing what they say. The other aspect is social equity, which is provide career opportunities to talented underrepresented minorities, which is the second argument. The third one is has to do with the research workforce. In the cases specifically for the NIH, which is the one that I'm the most familiar with, so is to prepare researchers to investigate. Prepare researchers to investigate disease that disproportionately affect underrepresented minority groups. So this is what is called the health disparities argument. So the idea is that if I am a Mexican American and all my family have diabetes, it's very likely that I'm going to be, first of all, very familiar with that disease. And second of all, I'm just want to be more likely to study that disease that affects more of people like me. And so this is what is called the argument about health disparities. National Science Foundation have also put some arguments along those sides that we need to, if the majority of the population now is going to belong to these groups that are minority now in the future, so we need to prepare these generations to maintain the global economic leadership. So let me now change gears to start talk about why we have this disparity in terms of students of underrepresented minority groups, of these three groups, coming along the pipeline and moving on to the professoriate. So what I have here is now I'm talking local. This is the University of California. This is the top educational system, top tier system of higher education in the state of California, based on the master plan of higher education. So the master plan of higher education says the University of California is going to accept the top 12.5% of high school graduates. That's that's one way that maintaining this leadership in undergraduate education. So which put us approximately at this point. So what happened with the representations of all these groups? And I put it here, if you're a 10th grader, what are the chances that you're going to be admitted in one of the University of California campuses that we have for undergraduates? So if you're a female, your chances is 13%. If you're a male, white, your chances is 10%. Now, if there was equity, we will expect all the other groups to have the same chance, the same opportunity to attend the University of California system. This is what happened with the Asian Americans. So if you're a 10th grader, Asian American, female, you have a 39% chance to be admitted to a UC. But if you're an African American boy or Hispanic American boy, you have only 4% chance of getting admitted. Now, this is quite shocking every time that I show this data to anybody. But that's the reality. And the reason is because the schools where these populations are living get their resources from the local taxes. And the local taxes, of course, if they live in poor communities, they're not going to have as much resources, economical, and then translate into educational resources. And that's what is going to generate these humongous disparities. Now, we're just talking about the desegregation of the schools. So what happens now, if I graph, this is, if you go to a school, so you're going to have certain percentage of underrepresented minorities. Some schools have almost 100% of underrepresented minorities. And some other schools have almost 0% of underrepresented minorities. They are primarily in affluent, primarily white or Asian American neighborhoods in the area. So each of these dots that you see represent one single high school in relation to the percentage of that high school graduating classes that become UC eligible. As you can see, there is almost a perfect negative correlation. That means if you go to a high school that has primarily underrepresented minorities, you go to a high school that has primarily Mexican Americans, African Americans, your chances of going to UC decrease substantially. So because of this, the University of California has made substantial changes in its admission policies. So tomorrow, we are voting, the state of California is voting a proposition to allow ethnicity as a criteria for admission and for other things. So this is a reversal of the Proposition 209 that prohibit the use of race and ethnicity as a criterion for admission. So what happens in the late 90s, so that was when this proposition passed, we are reversing. Well, if it passes, we don't know yet. So we'll have the answer perhaps tomorrow, whether now diversity and ethnicity is a criteria that can be used for admission. So now let me talk more specifically about our programs. And so I don't know if there's a question or comment. No, okay. So what are the objectives of our minority science programs? So we are a comprehensive effort. We start with the freshman year, we go all the way to the graduate studies to increase the number, and this is very important, academic excellence, because we want to produce leaders that eventually become principal investigators of NIH and other grants. So we provide advanced research training and competitiveness necessary for the successful pursuit of a biomedical research career. So we prepare these freshmen as well as community college students to pursue PhD degrees specifically. This is not my mandate. This is the mandate of the grants that support our programs. To pursue PhD, eventually a postdoc, and become faculty at top universities. So in year 2005, we received this presidential award. So the reason why President George W. Bush is not in this picture is because the day before this, because the director of NSF asked the president when these awards are going to be given to make sure that they're going to be in the White House. And the reason why the president was not there was because he had to travel to Asia because there was the avian flu pandemic beginning over there. So he went actually physically to Asia to find out what was the situation. And so he went, the day before, and I missed the opportunity to have a picture. Okay. So the reason why we were given this award is because we developed this comprehensive pipeline. So the idea is that high school students can move either to community college or come to UC Irvine as a freshman or sophomores, and they move on into the academic pipeline until they become faculty. So we have developed a series of programs. They have different acronyms. And so we have one that is for freshmen, sophomores, and that also support PhD students. We have two grants for juniors and seniors, and we have another one for community college students. So the idea is to feed this pipeline. And so very interestingly, NIH did not have any kind of program for the postdocs. Just about 2 years ago, they begin this program specifically for postdocs. But it's not administered by a principal investigator. It's given directly to the postdoc, which is good. It's in a way it's a research grant for them to move on to the faculty. And so some of the outcomes that we have had, I'm showing here in the MSP undergraduate outcomes. So I divide the quantitative outcomes in 5 years. So how many of our students have entered PhDs? So before I started directing these programs, we had a record of only 1. The number increased to 13, and then it went the next 5 years to 53. We maintained about 56, and then we went to 71. Now, something that I started developing in 2005 was a laboratory specifically dedicated to train our students. And the reason is because I found out that faculty were not as willing to take our students. Why? Because they didn't have this experience. So the students don't have this experience because they are not able to get into laboratories. So to break that cycle, and I think most importantly, to educate our underrepresented minorities about how to be good mentees, that's why I opened this laboratory. And so the big challenge, the enormous challenge, is that I commit myself to give them independent projects to each of them. So if they are in my laboratory for 1 year, I commit to them to develop an independent project to each of them. And so this is an enormous pressure for me, but it has gave wonderful results. So the fraction of students that started research in my laboratory has been increasing, 10, 35, 47. So of course, we allow every single student to join any laboratory. We have over 200 faculty on campus that they can be the mentors of these students. We in no way force them to come to my laboratory. We open the door to my laboratory, say, if you cannot find, or if you are interested in the topic of research that I do, just come. And many of them decide to come. And so the topic that I selected specifically to train students was to understand antibiotic resistance in the environment. And so that's the working hypothesis of the laboratory. So we study the antibiotic resistant genes that we find in the environment. So many of these genes come actually from, of course, hospitals and agriculture. So they are selected most likely there, but they are able to survive in the environment. And so we are looking, we have a big project on genomics of bacteria. So we are sequencing, fully sequence the genomes of these bacteria that we get from the environment. And that gives the basis for giving individual projects, because each student can first annotate and fully assemble a plasmid that contains these antibiotic resistant genes. We see if it's conjugative, if it can move to another bacteria. So we have the phenotype, and then we can relate it to the genotype. So it's a very rich kind of training where they are exposed to biochemistry, molecular biology, genetics, many of the courses that they are learning. So they are learning in the laboratory physically. So this coincides in 2005 with this movement, a national movement that started about doing courses that do practical research to train students. And so the effect of the laboratory has been tremendous, as you can see. So every year there's a larger fraction of the students who go to a PhD that started their training in my laboratory. The other aspects where Marlene plays a humongous role is in the preparation of the students to enter PhD programs. So I'm very strong at the beginning of this pipeline. Marlene is at the end of this pipeline of the undergraduates, preparing them to get into a PhD. She makes a lot of relationships with PhD programs nationwide. She is in the steering committee of the Annual Biomedical Research Conference for minority students. For our students, going to national conferences is something big. For many of them, it's the first time taking an airplane or leaving the state of California. And so it makes a big impression on them to go to these conferences, staying, in the conference hotels. And so when we ask them about the experience at the end of when they are in the PhD, they say that was one of the things that they changed pretty much their lives. So the other aspect is the number of undergraduate alumni that are completing already PhD degrees. And as you can see, the numbers also keep increasing. So we have more than 200 students who started PhD, and of those are moving, getting their PhD, about 90 of them. I would say about half of them are pursuing postdoctoral positions. And I just mentioned that we have 4 of them, 2 of them have already NIH grants, which is big accomplishment because there are so few underrepresented minorities getting being principal investigators of federal grants. I would say in general that this is a good accomplishment. The other aspect is the quantitative outcomes. And so we care a lot about the universities where they are going to, because if we are going to develop leaders, they need to be in the top universities. So as a proxy for the quality, we use the US News and World Report rankings. And so if we take these students who were these 13 students and we get the median of the ranking, so this cohort went to a ranking number 33. So ranking of UC Irvine is number 35. So they are going to universities that are similar to ours. And the next year they improve a little bit to 30. They're ranking 26.5. And these last cohorts during the past 5 years, they went all the way to ranking number 19, which is great. So it means that many of them are starting to go to top universities, Berkeley, that would be great, Stanford. We have a couple of students in Harvard and so on. It's going to be make a big difference in their careers. So, so let's talk now about the graduate students. So the graduate students, before I started the programs, we have a very small population of underrepresented minority graduate students. I remember, a comment at that time of a faculty who said that we don't have problem of retention of underrepresented minorities, and the reason is because we don't have underrepresented minorities. However, we don't have a problem of retention. So by 2013, so we increased the number and became UCI the #1 in Hispanic PhD award in biological and biomedical sciences. That was particular years was higher than the normal. We have 13 students. So there has been a steady increase in the year 2000. First, of course, with the admissions, and later on with them starting to graduate. So right now we are aiming at having at least 10 underrepresented minorities receiving their PhDs each year in biological and biomedical sciences at UCI. So that will make about 20% of the population. Of course, we always want to increase it, but at least maintain it. So there's a question. Is that the case?
Yes, that's the case. So Vincenzo, he's asking, are you similar success with the students pursuing non-academic careers?
So the students who are pursuing non-academic careers are primarily going to the industry. And it's no secret that the industry is going to pay higher salaries than a postdoc. And so I think that makes them attractive for many of our students. The issue that we see is that somebody who is in academia can go to industry, but somebody who is in industry is more unlikely to go back to academia. So the same situation happens with the MD PhDs, where students send their application to the MD PhD committee, and if it's not admitted to the MD PhD, it gets turned out to the MD committee, but never to the PhD. So these are these asymmetries that we have to be, we have to just pay attention to.
But I will also to bring that point just to answer that specific question, because also it was the industry. Yes, the students, they are very successful when they go to the other non-academic options. Yes, they are ending in the government or in the industry. There are the researchers of the industries, the leader researchers or the government. Also, they are teachers in Cal State or other institutions. Yes.
Yeah, another aspect is very important is the fact that right when we are taking students to the PhDs is when the national discussion is developing about an excess of PhDs, #1, and the lack of jobs for those who pursue the PhD. So in that sense, we are going counter-current, because even NIH is stimulating students to pursue careers other than faculty, which perhaps is not going to be very well suited with increasing the number of underrepresented minorities in academia. But still, we pursue that as one of the goals of the programs, and that's because that's the NIH mandate. So let's move on. Okay, so let's now start talking about what are the components that are discussed nationally that we use. And one of these is what is called the inclusion. So I borrowed this graphic as to non-exclusion community, people of underrepresented minority groups are kind of outside the periphery. During the segregation, they are just linked, put together outside of the main community. During the integration, they are part of the community, but still segregated within. And so the idea is to have a total inclusion, where all the underrepresented minorities are part of the community, are participants of that community. And so for that, it's very important to ask the following question. What is the experience of underrepresented minority in academia? And that's exactly what many of our students tell us that they feel like. You know, if they come to a primarily non-URM university, they feel like they are on their own. I mean, most of the people around them, they don't look like themselves, totally different, perhaps than the high schools where the majority was of the same ethnic group that they are. And so this is very well known throughout, even for our faculty who are underrepresented minority, that they are normally, they say, I am the only one in, and then you put the blank, can be in the conference and so on. And sometimes they are not, just because there is this natural empathy of talking more likely with people that look like yourselves, that talking to people that look different than you. I mean, this is empathy. I mean, this is not perhaps, is completely unconscious. This is something kind of our nature. So what do we do to stimulate this inclusion? So my laboratory and the training that we provide, we on purpose stimulate that inclusion. So this is a nurturing environment dedicated to undergraduate research. So that helps them. So because the focus is the undergraduates, you know, it's very good. If they go to other laboratories, of course, the focus are going to be them. They are going to be at the bottom of the totem pole, right? And so postdocs, PI is going to be most important person there. So we provide the physical space for students to meet. This is because of the laboratory. When they go do experiments, they are, you know, together there. So we encourage students to bond, get support, and increase their self-esteem. This is very, very important because there's a combination of being young and being, you know, marginalized in a society that makes self-esteem, you know, particularly fragile. And so we, you know, cherish a lot when the students receive an award. Many of the students that are in my laboratory receive awards at national conferences. We stimulate that so they start to realize that they are able to receive an award. So when they join my laboratory, I tell them, you know, many of you are going to receive awards at the national conference. And they look at me like, what are you talking about? We have never done research. How much less we are going to receive an award at the national conference? But that turned out to be the case. So they gain research experiences early in their careers. And so we start first working on a group research projects. And after that, they work on individual projects once they just kind of understand the methodology and how to operate kind of more independently. They are moved into individual projects. We have journal clubs, of course, like you know, any laboratory. And so students present. There is, you know, openness to criticism, but lots of respect. Bullying is completely not allowed in any form or shape. But strong criticism, yes, that's. So we educate the students, and they, you know, at the beginning, they take it, you know, like a personal. They say, no, this is professional. You have to get used to that. You're going to see it in journals. When you submit papers, you're going to see it when you submit proposals and so on. So get used to this criticism. It's professional criticism. We educate them about that. They give, of course, practice presentations. Now, I would say that this is like three major components of our programs. The first one is my laboratory. The second is, of course, the research experience that they have in other laboratories. Which is, of course, perhaps, you know, the meat of the most important part of the programs. They have over 200 laboratories. We work with the faculty to train them. And now there's a change in our university of lots of new faculty. We need to recruit them. We need to train them to be good mentors, particularly for underrepresented minorities. And of course, we have also many professional activities to encourage interactions among all MSP students. So we have a weekly seminar series. That's for everybody. Everybody is required to participate in that. It's like a departmental seminar. We have an annual research symposium. We travel to national conference for the students to present their research. Again, students, you know, put that as a highlight. This is a, you know, small intervention in terms of finance. It's just a travel, and it makes a big impact. Of course, they need to have the research already developed to present it, and they need to have a good experience at the national conference. We prepare them for this, going to these national conferences. The preparation starts as to how do you take an airplane. And so things simple as that. Networking is very important. We bring to our symposium, to our different activities, we bring grad students that are underrepresented. They also give tours of the laboratories. Networking is critical. Also, we stimulate that they talk among themselves, talk about classes they are taking, to create precisely this community so they feel supported here. We have workshops, graduate school applications, and also visits to graduate programs at other universities to start exposing them. We want our students to go to the East Coast. We want the students to go to the University of Minnesota. We want students to experience different life than outside of California. For many of them, their family is very important, and that's the reason why they don't want to go to the East Coast. But so Marlene, push them to visits, to know faculty over there, and so on. I think there was a question. Is that the case?
Yes, there was a question. Hussein raised his hand, and we had a question from Ron as well. I'll allow Hussein to talk first. Let's see. Hussein, can you unmute your mic? Go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So you just were talking about students who are maybe reticent to travel due to things that are maybe unique to, or more unique to, minority populations, like closeness to family, which is really important for many different minority populations. What do you, how do you accomplish changing the culture or addressing that in hiring practices amongst universities that, or granting agencies that look for a lot of diversity in, regional experience and stuff like that when they're doing hiring, seeing that you've traveled to different universities in different parts of the country or overseas to work, and yeah. So I guess that's my question. How do you address that when we're trying to improve equity among these underrepresented minorities that have different values maybe than are typical for academics?
That's an excellent question. And so our MARC program, one of the programs for juniors and seniors, requires them to go to another university during at least one summer. So that program is, they have to do 2 summers of research plus the academic years in between. And so we are always looking for summer programs at other universities. And that's one way of encouraging them to visit, and particularly, the East Coast, places that are not so cold during the summer. That's another aspect that the students, talk about. So they can go and experience one summer. It's not a big, it's just a couple of months. It's not a big commitment. And this is one way that we have, successful. So we have some universities in the East Coast that they go for the summer and then they come back for the PhD. So in terms of effectiveness, I would say that that's one of the most effective, to have these summer programs. And having, for example, a summer program funded by National Science Foundation, that's very likely to be an effective intervention. I don't know if Marlene wants to say some other.
Yeah, maybe let's. This is another way, of course, the summer programs. Also, when the students are working in the labs, we start to prepare them. And then we told them that a main component is to do the networking on the East Coast institutions, to have a global picture, to understand more about the research, to understand that research is more universal. And we prepare them, and the preparation takes like 1 year. They share their experiences, students that they already went to the East Coast institutions, or even that they went abroad, or the summer programs. So I think it's a change of culture. That is not only in one summer, it's not only in 1 month. It takes like a long process, and this is related to the mentoring that Luis he was referring.
Yes, this past summer, for example, we have a panel from students that were in different universities. There was one panelist who was in New York City. And so she was walking in the street and, with a cell phone and being panelist. And she was kind of showing, here's the city, this is where I live, and so on. It was so live. And so this is a wonderful, that without the Zoom, perhaps we wouldn't have it. So, thanks to Zoom, I think we're going to start doing, having many panels. We have had also panels from other universities that contact Marlena, say, we would like to have a panel with faculty. We have it to Zoom, and I think they are quite successful. So, we are open always for new activities, improvement, adopting technology, and so on. Okay, so
Louis, there's one more question. This one's in the question and answer. So can you see that, or do you want me to read it to you?
Can you read it?
Yes. This is from Ron Ogaki. Sorry for the last name. A retired faculty member. The problems here are so complex. How do we prioritize? The K through 12 achievement gap in Minnesota is one of the worst in the country. The graduation gap at the U has ranked near the bottom, and U is on the bottom 20 list of schools with little class/race interaction. Students he has known have filed complaints about microaggressions from professors. So I guess the question is, how do you prioritize action throughout the educational or professional system?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So the first step to make interventions for the represented minorities in science is to affect retention. And of course, admission is the first step, right? The admission part is, if you want to change the K-12 system, it will require such a monumental amount of money. But something that you can do is start finding, these few high school students who will survive the academic environment. And by say survive means that they're going to graduate with a baccalaureate, with a GPA, of 3 or above. So if you could start cultivating those few students in high school, but I think the most important will be a summer program before they start their freshman year. The highest attrition happens during the first 2 years. And the subjects that literally, take them out of the pipeline is chemistry. This is, a major obstacle, at least for our students in the curriculum that we have. So years ago, I had the opportunity to direct a program exactly geared towards that. That has been also very successful in retaining students. And so at that time, I put, the focus on studying general chemistry in the summer before their first year. So that's a preparatory chemistry. And so, of course, you have to, they're young students. So there are issues about maturity, time management. So they need to be physically on campus to, to experience. But I would be surprised that there are, no underrepresented minorities at all at the University of Minnesota. It's just a matter of who is going to fund these interventions. I mean, it costs some money. To me, to develop an intervention, you have to have the money that is going to be able to support it. Because all these programs, the hook for the students is to provide them a little bit of money. Often when they come from low-income families, having a little bit of money attached to their education makes a difference, and that's why they're coming. So we don't have students coming to our programs because they say, I want to be a scientist and I want to be a Ph.D. and so on, because they don't even know what a Ph.D. is about. So they get, attracted for several reasons. One is their peers, because they hear that, my peers is doing research. And then others say, I hear that research is important for me to go to medical school. And so if you are paying me, well, it's even better. And so, and it has to be hand in hand, doing well in the classes with the research experience. So it's very easy to overwhelm a student with so many things. If they have deficiency academically, if you're gonna do research on top of that, it's very hard. So you need to take them, I think, targeted at different stages in the pipeline. For the incoming freshmen, is to do well in the first 2 years. I would not perhaps put much emphasis in the research part as to what we call a survive, which is, do well in your science classes, and educate the students that an A in a non-science class with a C in a science class that looks terrible in a transcript, because they might do, straight A's in Spanish, but straight C's in chemistry, and so that just looks terrible for an admissions committee, later on in their careers. I don't know if I have answered, but trying to think about change the K-12, that looks like a monumental, because I have had experiences with very large grants that the university has had. And once it gets dissolved among the humongous populations that we have, it gets very thin in terms of impact. Yes, I would say that it's better to focus in terms of getting more grants. It's better to focus on very specific students that you show that they have make a difference, than just put lots of money into so many people that you don't know what's the effect that this is having. I think there's another question.
Yes, there is two more questions here. First from Peter. Luis, what constitutes a little bit of money? How much support do students in your program receive as scholarship versus employment? Okay.
So, and the slide is coming, I can tell you right now. So we gave them a minimum, some depends on the program. So if it's, the NIH will tell you whether you pay them salaries or you pay them a stipend. So if you pay them a stipend, there is a cap, which is set by the university. We cannot pay them above that cap. And so, and of course they have financial aid. And so our program just fill that part of that would be loans, if it's paid through stipends. If it's paid through to salaries, to wages, then it's the minimum wage. This is what we have to pay them. So there are programs, for example, that pay them here on campus and other parts, that are paid them $4,000 for summer. But let me tell you, one of the parts that perhaps also have some cost is the person who runs it. And so if you're going to have a faculty just dedicated to that, so it takes a lot of time. So Marlena and myself are dedicated 100% to these programs. And faculty have had these programs in the past. They think like, it's a piece of cake. I just distribute checks that NSF give me, and that's it. And they fail. They never get renewed. And we have, I review grants for NSF and NIH, and I see these programs that are pretty much just distributing checks, and they fail badly because students require a lot of time. So Marlene just start telling you that it takes 1 year before they get into the PhD to prepare them. Because the students go through a transformation of not knowing what is a PhD. Am I going to be accepted into a PhD? Am I going to be happy there? Am I going to leave my home? And they're growing. They grow fast from the junior to the senior year. They are different persons. From freshmen to seniors. So amount of time dedicated for mentoring is a big thing. The other aspect is how the university is going to reward that. So if you're going to expend your summer as a faculty, is the university going to see it, as positively as you preparing so many grants, right? That you could do, so many papers that you could publish during the summer. So the structure of the school at the university in terms of rewarding people who are developing these programs is very important. And let me tell you, here in the University of California, we have had our ups and downs. So one provost comes and says, this is this is very important of your dossier. And then it kind of vanishes through time. And then another one comes. And the other part is that the political environment, right? Now it's high. Now it's high. And I've been through these roller coasters in the past. The good thing for us, the sustainability, has been the federal government. The state of California has given this burst of let's invest in outreach, let's invest in, and then they vanish a couple of years after. And of course, you cannot sustain a program like this with a burst of millions of dollars, and then a couple of years after, you don't have a dime, because everything gets dismantled, you have destroyed. And so it takes time to prepare. And that's exactly what the science issue is about, is that the federal government needs to have a sustained programs. NSF, for example, used to have at least 2 of these grants that we used to have. An NSF director came, use them for other purpose. So pretty much finish them, and they never recover. I mean, that's the problem. And NSF has gone through some of these times where the director gives money, and then the next one takes it away, and so that just breaks. There are more hands I see coming. Questions?
Yes, I will. I believe Jerry has raised his hand. I'll allow him to talk. Jerry, can you ask your question now?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed your talk. Let's see if you can turn my camera on, maybe, I don't know. Well, anyway, as a graduate of the University of California, I am been interested in these issues for my whole career. And the number of Hispanics, especially within university administrations and professoriate, is much lower than the population in general. But one of the things that this has enticed me to do was to develop relationships with colleagues and universities in South America and Central America. And one of the things that I just don't have a really good answer for is, what is it about our immigration experience into North America that causes such a disparity between South America universities, which were educating fantastic scientists and were going into science as a normal part of their activity, and it seems to be commensurate with what we're doing in North America. And when those immigrant families come to the US, they seem less willing to go to our universities and less willing to pursue these kinds of careers, because it would seem it's just, I don't understand why that disparity exists, because it hasn't been explained to me probably in a good way.
So I don't think I have the full answer, but I can give you some of my experience. So there are very different socioeconomic classes among the Latins or the Hispanic Americans. So I would say the ones that cross the border walking, they are normally individuals that have little or no education. So they came to work in the agricultural fields of California, right? And so they perhaps didn't finish even primary. And so the fact that their children perhaps finished high school is a big accomplishment in the family. On the other hand, the people who came from South, Latin America, they came traveling through an airplane. So they're most likely to have a bachelor degree. And so it would be natural for their children just to go to the university just because they went to that. And that's perhaps the disparity that you see between people that come from Chile, Argentina, Brazil, and so on, versus the Mexican Americans who are more linked to the agriculture. And of course, there are other people, like myself, that I came from Mexico. I was born and raised in Mexico. I came to Irvine to for my interest in evolutionary biology. And my advisor happened to be the director of these programs that I'm running now. From Mexico, I had no idea that this existed. That these disparities existed.
But Luis, when you go to the universities, like I just most recently 2 years ago was in Chile, and I talked to the students. Many of them come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And so, because I could explain it, their father went to college, so they went to college. And yes, there are people like that are there. But many of the students, they don't come from that kind of background. And yet they're very comfortable at going to the university. I mean, they're like our first generation students, of course. They require some care, but they don't seem that different. And that just bothers me. I guess there's lots of theories about it, but I just thought I'd pose that question because it's just a nagging question is why is it so different? Because the numbers don't lie, and the numbers show that in the U.S. we're doing a very, I'd say mediocre to poor job of getting students tracked in that line. And I really like your program, by the way. It's great.
Thank you. Yes, talking with our students that are Mexican Americans, so they come from rural areas that have no resources at all. We're talking that their grandmother in Mexico, the floor where they live is not concrete, is dirt. I mean, that's the type of living conditions and the poverty where they are coming from, and that's the reason why they come, walking right across the border, by land. So it's very, very impoverished communities from Mexico that came at different times. So that's the other part. And so the subsequent generations. Now the Mexican American massive migration is very recent. I think it's kind of the main immigrants to the United States during the couple of decades were exactly the Mexican Americans. And if you compare it with somebody who lives in a city in Latin America, they have also totally different life experiences. I mean, the fact that they live in a city, it makes it, the person very, very different. Growing in Mexico City, I met people in Mexico that, they were coming from communities from Oaxaca who did not speak Spanish. And so these are the same communities that sometimes I see here that, their parents or their grandparents speak a language different than Spanish, which is not the same again with Chile. If you go to Chile, Argentina, to the main capitals, so these are people who are urban, right? And so that's still another level of education, I would say, and life experiences than a community from Oaxaca, who Spanish is a second language. Now English will be the third language, and so that's also what makes the difference. When you talk about socioeconomic differences, it's a monumental, I think, very large differences. I don't know if that answers your question or you have another.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
Luis, I was wondering, do you want to, we have a few questions and a few people raising their hands, but did you want to finish your points or did you want to take those questions now?
Well, I think that we can take them and then I can finish the points. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Great. So we had a question on the question and answer. And I believe both of these are related. Let's see. What if students come from a disparate background where they don't excel in undergraduate education? How does your advice account for students or promote a culture where students don't do well in undergraduate to excel to then a higher education level?
Okay. So we have a tutoring program. For example, physics is one of those, right? When we take them when they're juniors, that's one of the physics and mathematics, and we have a tutoring program. And of course, we are working with a small fraction of the underrepresented minorities that are in the university. I would require, way more resources to be able to tackle all the students that are in the program. As you can see, that the numbers are relatively small, but the impact is very, very high. So,
also,
yes.
Sorry, no, I think because I'm reading the question. So just to give, I think it's also a lot of peer support from the students. The culture is about success. And we found that when the students, they help each other, when this is a strong network, with the advanced students, they start to support the other students. So it's a community that that is been helping other students who are not stellar in their classes. The students who are, they help them a lot because we create that sense of community and support and academic excellence among all of the students. I hope that answers the question.
So I think I have just a couple of more slides. Let me just for the people I know that they have to be leaving. So just the next one is about difference between equality and equity. Perhaps you have seen these slides that each student in an equity situation, each student receives resources and opportunities to succeed. So they just put it here in the form of a cartoon. So the interventions that we have for equity is, so we still start in the sophomore, just before the end of the sophomore. So the summer after the sophomore year is when they start doing research. For the grad students is the summer before the first year. So mentoring, of course, is key. I talked already about some of these activities. So if you ask the program directors in general of these NIH grants, what is the most added value of the programs, they will tell you that is mentoring, number one. If you ask the students, what is the number one added value, they will tell you that is the payment for research. And of course, it's both, and all the things that are in the middle. But it's just to show you the differences in perceptions that exist between the students and the faculty. So this one, I'll skip it. So just to the do's and don'ts to recruit underrepresented minority grad students. So do recruit vigorously, qualify underrepresented minorities, because the don'ts, I would say, do not recruit unqualified underrepresented minority individuals. Because this, I have seen it with some programs. If you recruit unqualified students, that is just going to backfire badly for the entire program. So programs are now focusing on this, which is grit, which is focusing on the persistence, drive, enthusiasm, motivation, and positive attitude, rather than, for example, GRE scores. So it's critical the amount and quality of the research experience, the interpersonal skills, the communication skills, integrity, openness, trustworthiness, and consistency. I just put here as an example, one of our students who has a GPA of 3.4, 2 years of sustained and solid research experience with an excellent letter of recommendation from the faculty advisor. This of our students is going to be admitted in the top 20 graduate programs in the nation. And so sometimes we have a naive faculty, for example, from our admissions committee, who is thinking about admitting this student. And I tell them, don't worry, they are going to be admitted in a university with a much higher ranking. I mean, these universities are going aggressively after these students who have, because the top GPA might be 3.6 or something like that among underrepresented minorities. So this is as an open question that I have for you, but we can take questions that you have.
Great. We do have Peter has a follow-up. Peter, I just allowed you to talk if you want to ask your question.
Hi, Peter. You're muted.
Okay, maybe he's away. We'll try again. Axel also has a question, so I'll allow him to talk. Axel, go ahead.
Hey, thanks. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Hey, Luis, thank you very much for your presentation. It's actually very inspiring and very interesting. I just, what I wanted to chime a little bit on what you and Jerry were talking just some minutes ago. By the way, I am a Latino faculty at the Department of Agronomy. I am originally from Guatemala in Central America. So this is an issue that it always makes me think about, and it bothers me a lot. And it bothers me a lot because I know that there is many capable people everywhere, not only in Latin America. And it turns out there is this big issue that you've been talking about here. So I know by fact, actually, that to me, from my personal opinion, probably one of the main issues that we have here is that Latino families here in America have a problem that I call it, a vicious cycle. So they come from, as you said, from families that are not educated, not all, most of them probably. And these families, they basically don't know how to properly guide their kids so they can eventually try to pursue an academic career. So my question to you, Luis, is what do you guys are doing to try to tackle that issue to the very root, to its very root, which is, try to break that cycle within the family?
Yes, that's a very important question. And so with the resources that we have, the fact that our students are moving, for example, to PhD, and then later on to postdocs and some of them into the academia, that has a ripple effect tremendously on their family and also their community, because they talk with students that are in their peers, for example, from high school and so on. So we have some students that come from places here in Los Angeles, where there's a very high level of crime, gangs, and so on. And they say, I'm the first one in my high school, for example, who is attending a PhD. And so I think it's this role model that I think is going to make is going to change things. Now, with the resources we have, we can do only so much, right? I mean, this is a humongous problem that exists in the nation. It's not like, and I don't think we are going to solve it with the few resources that we have from the federal government. But this impact, particularly generational impact, and the fact that for me, having a faculty, even if it's a community college or a university who is primarily focusing on teaching, having this Hispanic or African American faculty as a role model, it will influence a lot of students that are going to be passing through those courses. I mean, just the fact that you are from Guatemala, and if you tell them, I'm from Guatemala, you are going to inspire a lot of students. Actually, when we ask our speakers to give a talk about the research, I always ask them about, can you tell us how you became a scientist? And it's very interesting, how we all came from different paths, just because we like science. And that's kind of the common language that we speak. And that's what motivates us, right? What make us, waking up in the morning and then just go to our exciting jobs. And this is something that many people don't realize. At the same time, the high level of independence and job satisfaction that scientists have. And students start to see that, and that's why they pursue it. So it's something just now you're telling me is related to the question of Peter. So when we pay them minimum wages to our students, so their parents get paid also these hourly wages. And so our students think that you should be in the laboratory only for those hours that you get paid. And so we also need to educate them that science is going to work long hours, to be competitive. And perhaps, starting to change that way of thinking that if you don't pay me an hour, I don't work. Because if they don't get paid to go to school, and yet they invest in tons of hours, particularly if they want to be in a very competitive university like the University of California. So they're going to have to work way more than 40 hours per week. So this changes. So it's many things that we need to educate our students about. Some of them were saying it's a different lifestyle, which I agree. It's a different way of looking at the world if you are a scientist, than being on an hourly wage. Thank you very much. Accept. Are there more questions, more comments?
Yes, Hussein, I just allowed you to talk. Did you want to ask a question directly?
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff that you've been talking about today has been interventions that kind of work within these systems that have been developed that we know don't really benefit or don't really, aren't really accustomed for these underrepresented minorities. And so what other things can we do to kind of address these more systemic problems? So one that comes to mind is the idea of unpaid research, which for a lot of people, I know when I was an undergrad, unpaid research was just not a possibility for me. I wouldn't have been able to do it if I didn't have a mentor who offered me a salary and even a pay above minimum wage. So what are things that you can do to address some of these more systemic problems that you see in these systems?
So something that we do is this calling mentoring. So once we get a student, and that student we know that is qualified, right? It has a capacity. It has already the education, the preliminary education that is needed to succeed. So we call it a mentee. A mentee is, just to make the analogy, it's like an academic son or daughter. You know, it's the way that you would treat your sons or daughters. So failure is not a possibility. So if that student doesn't show up, Marlena is gonna call them. It's not like at the classes that when you teach a class, I taught, you know, for many years. And so if the students, you know, pass or don't pass, you know, they move on and that's it. It's very different when you are a mentor, because you're gonna go after that student and say, what happened? And that student is gonna tell you, and you can hear, you know, so many issues that they might have. You know, depression is something that happens, economic issues with the family, now with the COVID, you know, the parents lost their job, so many issues, and you have to be willing to hear them. And so what can you do physically? So you can get one of these underrepresented students, make sure that is well qualified, put them in your laboratory and mentor them. And, you know, just tell them, many of our students will drop our minimum wage for an extra 50 cents being in a cashier. I mean, for us, it's like, wow, what are you thinking? So for 50 seconds, you are gonna, you know, your life, that is gonna change completely with our programs. To be in a cashier that you're not gonna have any, you know, education, anything that's going to contribute to your career. And our students think like that. You know, 50 seconds will make it. 50 seconds per hour will be the difference. But it requires this persuasion, motivation. As I say, it's like imagine that your son or daughter will tell you that for 50 seconds, they are not gonna, you know, get this great education that would be in our programs. That
You mean 50 cents, right?
Cents, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
50 cents, yes, 50 cents of a wage, of an hourly wage. And you know, mentoring students is in your classes, in your laboratories. Many of our students also, sometimes before they join our laboratories, they get paid by the faculty because they are like you know, technicians. So I would say, what can you specifically do if you have a contact with one of the students to your classes that you know that is particularly good? Because in your classes, you identify them, right? You have a chance if you pull them out and say, you know, come to see me, or just provide them mentoring for their careers. That will make a big difference.
I'm also strongly encourage you, all of you, if you are interested in recruit and then to see more on to encourage your students to see all of these national conferences that right now they are around, like the Annual Biomedical Research Conference for Minority Students, the SACNASA conference. There are more conferences, the Sigma Psi also, they're focusing a lot of underrepresentation. Now, even the AAAS is also focusing on the representation and recruit underrepresented minority students. So the sources are there, and they even the conference, the Gordon Conference, they have also sources for underrepresented minorities. So I think it's just a matter just to start, and one by one. This is the way that we build the program, one by one.
So there's also the National Mentoring Network. So even if the students are not in your university, you can always mentor a student who is in another university. So they're always looking for people who are scientists who can mentor these students. And I think there's plenty of students who want to be who want to have a mentor. I see some hand raised and some other questions, or is that?
I think I don't see anyone else. If you do have another question, please raise your hand, and I will unmute you or enter it into the chat box. Otherwise, Don or Gary, did you have any follow-up?
Well, Luis, I have one. You know, I've been at the University of Minnesota for about 46 years, and I've watched, you know, a series of attempts to try to diversify our undergraduate and graduate programs, and we haven't been very efficient at it. And I was always wondering, you know, as you were speaking, you were talking about putting your students on the East Coast, and here we sit in the Midwest, and and in the northern part of the Midwest, in this pretty cold region of the continent. And I was just wondering what kind of suggestions you would have for us, just specifically at the University of Minnesota, knowing that it's a pretty white state. We do have some minority representation, but I live here in Shoreview, and within 4 mile from my house, the graduation rate of my minority students, including the Asian students, we rank about 48th or 49th in the country. Right? And we perceive ourselves as a high quality education state, but we have not done very well sitting here in this metropolitan area. So what advice would you give? And I heard you talking about showing up, making connections, and I do believe that that's the case. As we sit here as a group of faculty, do you buy the idea that this faculty that's represented here today and others, that we need to show up at various places where the students that we're talking about live and actually become part of their communities and participate in conversations closer to where they are living, whether it's here in downtown Minneapolis or St. Paul or someplace in California? Do you think that that is part of the long-term solution, is showing up where in the communities in which these students reside?
So let me just ask you a question. Do the Department of Agriculture have programs for diversity for underrepresented minorities that you can apply to, or you can add them to your grants?
Are you saying within the University of Minnesota?
I imagine that the main funding agency for your department is what, NSF and Department of Agriculture, is that the case? Or
yes.
what's the main source of funding?
Yes.
So because for us, that's what has made the difference. You see, the money is critical. And the money, because they have already very structured programs, when they give you the money, they give you these parameters and these guidelines. So it's not like we are doing them just on the vacuum. We are following specific guidelines of course for applications. That's exactly what we are doing. It's not like I wake up one day and say, we are going to prepare PhD students. This is something that comes from the federal government, and I just happen to apply for it, get the money, and be effective at doing it. And so, for example, our money from the university, discretionary money, is very, very limited. We will not be able to have this type of impact with the university resources. I mean, just to pay one salary, I mean, it's a substantial amount of effort. So I think that you should, in terms of a strategy, something that perhaps doesn't cost as much money, will be trying to diversify your undergraduate and graduate students. So the graduate students, for example, if you bring underrepresented minority graduate students, for the NIH grants that our faculty have, will pay for them, because the federal government is interested in increasing the number of underrepresented minorities in the universities. Therefore, our URM undergraduates who are going to PhD, they get aggressively recruited by the universities because they know that many of them are going to be paid by the federal government. And so I would say that if you want to increase the undergraduates, of course, you have to work locally. If you want to increase the graduates, perhaps you have to go nationally. So it's a different strategy. I don't know if that answered my question, your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Luis, there is a question here from Mary. I'll ask it to you. Given the significance of mentoring students, what do you do to ensure that faculty who work with URM students understand the needs of these students and have the mentoring skills you mentioned?
So we invite the faculty for the first time to our programs by giving a talk. And so that way the students know what the research of that faculty is about. And then based on that, our students start to go to those laboratories. And of course, we explain to the faculty what are the expectations of the program. And we still need to do a lot of work in terms of more systematic training about the mentors. This is also a discussion that happens at the national level. How to improve the mentoring and how to train the trainers. This has started, a few years ago. We still have to develop, more that. We also invite them to our symposium so that they get to know the research that is conducted by our students. So there's a culture also here in the university, which the founding dean of our school thought that undergraduates were as capable of doing research as graduate students. So the founding dean started research experiences by graduates as a regular course. So there's this culture already in our university that helps a lot, because the expectations for faculty is that they are going to have undergraduate students in their laboratories. That's the expectation. And that's part of the networking that exists. New faculty that come, everybody kind of tell them, you can take these 199 students, which is the name of the class, and you offer for credit these experiences in your laboratory. And the student affairs office and the dean of undergraduate education also ask the faculty that they have to be doing meaningful tasks in the laboratories, right? Which is not only washing dishes, but actually being part of the scientific process. So they have to read papers, they have to write a proposal, they have to write a report. They can publish in a journal that we have for undergraduates. So there is also this infrastructure that I think is very important that have helped our programs as well.
Are there any other questions, Cody?
I do not see any. I think that's it.
Oh, that was great, Luis and Marlene. Thanks a lot for coming. I thoroughly enjoyed it and I learned a lot. Hopefully we can work together in the future on, maybe you can help us out on like giving us some more suggestions as we move forward and ideas about how we might do this, recruiting different underrepresented groups to our graduate program as well as our undergraduate programs.
Very good. Thank you very much, Gary.
Thanks a lot for taking your time.
You're very welcome. Very nice to see you and to meet you all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks a
Thanks
lot.
all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.